After weeks of devastating floods that hit the country, the federal government has finally come to the aid of the affected states. Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Dr. Sadiya Umar Farouk, visited Bayelsa, Delta State, over recent floods that ravaged the state. In Bayelsa, the Deputy Governor, Senator Lawrence Ereja-Akpo, pointed out that initially the government and people of Bayelsa were not pleased with some of the remarks credited to the minister about the flood disaster in the state, that Bayelsa was now among the 10 worst affected states in the country. While in Delta, the federal government has announced the release of 105 metric tons of maize, 88.7 metric tons of sorghum, and 98.7 metric tons of gari for the victims of flood in the state. Sadiya Umar Farouk, who made the announcement on Tuesday during a visit, said the gesture was part of the efforts to ameliorate sufferings of the victims. So join us now on the morning show as we discuss the aftermath of the floods in Delta State and the federal government's intervention to victims. Is Charles Aniagwu, Delta State former Commissioner of Information. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to see you again. I'd like to go straight to it.
Thank you very much. I'm not former, maybe because I'm speaking for the presidential candidate.
Okay, so you're still information. Oh, yeah, so you're still the commissioner. Okay, we got that. Knock on wood. Thank you so much. Yeah. Real quickly, what was the response like? How long did it even take for the federal government to reach out to you? And how did you feel as a state? You feel let down by the federal government?
Initially, if you recall, being able to raise the alarm at the earlier part of the year, warning states and indeed the federal government of impending flood, which of course was enough for a number of states to take precaution. And here in Delta, we did take precaution beyond the fact that we had to prepare some grounds in form of IDPs. We were able to set up a committee, and then we also got orientation agency to move around some of these communities to impress it upon them on the need for them to take certain precautionary measures, which is why when you heard a number of fatalities, data didn't progress along that line. But beyond whatever the federal government have done now and what we have also tried to do, it is most important that we begin to embrace a much more preventive approach than the curative approach. What you see at the moment, whether you are providing food for the IDPs, or whether you are also asking them to leave troubled areas where they, of course, have their farmlands. And so it's not just where they live. You notice that no matter what you do in terms of them with shelter, that is very, very temporary. And in the course of time, return to their ancestral homes. And of course, by the time they get back, you know that everything will not be the same again, whether in terms of their homes or in terms of their farmland. And that is why we are saying that what is most important is for the federal government to galvanize all the states and see how we can begin to address it in a much more preventive approach than curative approach, which of course largely speaks to the need to dam two waterways, that is the River Benue and the River Niger. And then of course, even before, while that is going on, for us to begin a process of desiccation of these waterways. Difficult for them to contain the volume of water they should contain ordinarily. And you say water must find its level. So once you have a whole lot of citation, it means that the water level will now get to that point where it has to overflow the river banks. And you know what happens when that particular incident occurs. It finds its way to homes. And this time around with much more heavier rainfall, and of course the opening of the Lagdo Dam in Cameroon, you see that the volume of water went beyond measures and has caused a whole lot of devastation along these ways, particularly along these two major waterways in the country.
Well, yesterday, Mr. Aniagwu, the House of Representatives Committee on the Ecological Fund had a public hearing at which the Director General of the National Emergency Management Agency disclosed that his agency had reached out to over 1.4 million persons in need of assistance. But at that event, the Honorable Member of the House of Representatives, Oguma Johnson, representing the Edo APC, said that the DG NEMA was lying, and he protested and he even staged a walkout, that people in his own community or in his state, they've not seen anybody from the federal government, and that he thought that was not good enough. And then he left the meeting, we were told, in protest. Now, The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs has been quoted as having made available to your state, Delta State, millions of tons of grains, food and non-food items. Is this true? What have you received? Have you also, in Delta State, received any financial support from the federal government? Have you even seen anybody trying to come and provide any support, as claimed by the Director General of NEMA yesterday at the public hearing at the House of Reps Ecological Fund Committee?
Well, to be fair to the federal government, certain form of assistance have been given to a number of states, but I will not also disagree with my brother. Things may be claimed to have been distributed. At the end of the day, everything doesn't trickle down the way it left Abuja or wherever it may have departed. It's one of the challenges of the country. It is possible for the federal authorities to have the intention of distributing 10 bags of rice, for instance, and you end up seeing possibly just about 3 bags. And so we are not where the thing is being disbursed, and then what gets to us. But I have also that the luck we had here is that the state government did so much beyond mobilizing from our own resources, where we have spent a reasonable amount of money. We were also able to mobilize the private sector and a whole lot of other political actors. The wife of the governor was the first to begin a process of distributing food items and some other burdens to a number of the IDP camps, followed by some of the candidates, particularly the PDP candidate, Sheriff Borowori, was able to also reach out to a number of these IDP camps. In Delta, we had 10 IDP camps. Individuals who decided not to come to the camps, we also devised Then we must also appreciate a number of well-meaning private individuals, including corporate bodies. They responded very well. In Delta, we even progressed to the level of having to organize a party for them to dance and enjoy themselves and feel at home. So even when the governor visited, he made sure that a number of things they needed were provided. We also ensured that we registered them free of charge, because we do believe that even beyond the camps, there may be need for them to also have a cost to access Medicare. And so we are not providing them that Medicare only in camp. The governor asked that they should be registered for at least the next 1 year. Everybody who today is an IDP is going to enjoy free Medicare, so that in the case that in the event that they return to their homes and then they fall ill, because we do know that it's going to take a while for them to be able to bounce back, no matter the assistance which we are going to give them, because at the moment we have also worked out assistance that we're going to make available to them even as they begin to return to their homes. But beyond all that, just like I said earlier, we need to begin to put our effort towards a much more preventive approach. Otherwise, we will still get to 2023 and begin to repeat this same song. There are individuals to have they will benefit from federal authorities or elsewhere, where they may wish that it happens again, so that at the end of the day, somebody will tell you that we are giving 1 billion. Meanwhile, not up to $500 million may have been dispensed to these our brothers who are, of course, sacked by this perennial flood. So I will plead with those of us, my colleagues in the media, to begin to impress it upon government, particularly at the federal level, to adopt a much more preventive approach. Otherwise, individuals will begin to beat their chest that they did so well by bringing 2 bags of rice and 3 bags of beans, and then make it look as if they have done what nobody could do, and begin to wait for next year again. So it becomes more like a vicious circle. And so I am not here in data. We are not so much what have been given to them, even if it's important. What is much more important is how do we prevent this from happening next year, so that these funds that we're spending in providing food for those who ordinarily should be able to feed themselves will be available for us to tackle other needs of man, particularly in the area of infrastructure.
But Mr. Charles, it's obvious, let me use the local data balance. It's obvious that we're not the year what, end of quote. That means we don't heed warning. You know why I said that? Because this exactly happened in 2012. I was in that Ugeli camp set up in 2012. And it was caused by a phenomenon sort of like this. A dam too was opened about 10 years ago in 2012. And we are here again at this point in time. So let me end of quote, we're not the hear what in local parlance, we don't heed warnings. But the question is, let's take stock. What has been given to Delta thus far? And what is the extent of damage? what has been given to Delta State? Have they gotten donations from corporate bodies, well-meaning Nigerians? What are these monetary breakdowns? Let's start from that level of accountability first, and then we now take some of the extent of damage on land matter in Delta.
Well, let me start from the rear, which of course is the issue of the impact. Actually, a number of farmlands have been affected, a number of homes, particularly in about 19 of the 25 local government areas were very much heavily impacted. The other 6 had some element of effect of the devastating effect of the flood, but at least they could cope because they have a larger percentage of those 6 local governments in the upland not submerged. But for the 19, we had a whole lot of devastating effect of the flood. And what we did, like I said earlier, is beyond asking them to move upland, is also to provide the necessary relief materials. And now they are about to begin to go back to their homes. Some of them are already going, they go home, they come back to the camp because now it is easier to feed in the camp than for them to easily just settle at home. And then coming to the issue of what we have received. As a state, I must tell you at the moment, maybe because I just came in yesterday, I've not, I'll reach out to the SSG to know exactly what the federal government did. I know that the federal government did intervene with respect to some relief materials, but mostly we have gotten a whole lot of assistance from well-meaning individuals who trust and believe in the call by the governor for them to be able to reach out to our brothers and sisters that have been affected, by this devastating flood. But as a state government, we have spent well over R1 billion in also trying to reach out by providing beddings. And then with what we have done now with respect to the contributory health, which we have extended to them free of charge beyond their stay in camp, we have also been able to at least largely mitigate the effect of the health condition that may have been triggered by their coming to a very unconducive environment. Because no matter what you say, no matter what you provide in camp, you cannot compare somebody who is living in camp to somebody who ordinarily may be living in their homes. And you also do know that this flood have sacked a number of schools. We have now directed our Ministry of Environment to proceed to begin to fumigate these different schools preparatory for the return of academic activities in those schools. We have also asked that as soon as the camp, we close down the camps, the Ministry of Environment will also proceed to some of those camps, because a number of them are in schools, to also fumigate those areas so that those who will return to the camps will not for any reason get contaminated by whatever disease or whatever kind of thing that may have happened there that might not be too good in terms of health. But why we decide to give the free health is because it is easy for you to go and ask your brother, please give me half 2 bars of yam, let me cook for me and my children. But if you fall ill, it is not going to be easy for you to go to a pharmacy and ask them to please give you drugs free of charge. And you cannot easily also just go into a hospital and ask for free treatment. We have now registered them, giving them cards, so that even when they return to their ancestral homes, and in the event that they fall ill, they can go to any hospital, whether private or public, with that card and get treated free of charge. The government will pay for the next 1 year, all of them. And that is in addition to our ongoing free maternal health care, free under 5, those who are, who are less than 5 years of age. Those ones are continuous. But for other adults who ordinarily should have enrolled in our contributory health insurance scheme, because they are now displaced and we know that their source of income have been affected, the governor have directed that all of them should be registered and to access that particular scheme free of charge for the next 1 year. So, and that is to take care of whatever they may arise. Now, lastly, on the issue of what you may have received, I have told you that as a state government, what we are doing, that I don't have details of what the federal government may have sent to us. Individuals were asked to directly deal with the camps rather than bringing it to a state, a particular point where at the end of the day, you may not 100% ascertain that it gets to the people the way it was brought.
Okay, you talked earlier on about prevention. Now, what are those preventive measures, from your experience, that you think the government can take at both state and federal levels? And then second, what is the status now with regard to the flooding in Delta State now? Is the water receding or the problem is still the same?
Well, up in the state, the upper part of the River Niger has largely receded. When I mean the upper part, you're talking about the northern part. But from some parts in the southern part of the state, from Isoko down to Patani and then to Bomadi, is receding, but it has not fully receded, in which case you still have a number of homes and farmland still submerged. But once you come to the upper part, a large part of the flood have receded, and that which is why some of them leave the camp now. They go to their homes, tend to clean up and all that. Now, on the issue of the solution, I mentioned earlier, the larger part of the solution to this problem is going to be a federal intervention. I use the word federal advisedly, in which case the Nigerian government working, of course, with the different state government. Not only the issue of ecological fund, there must be an emergency measure. If, for instance, every year we have this incidence of flood. Since 2012, when the very disturbing flood happened, we have continuously had flood in each of the other years, though they don't have the magnitude of what we had this year. And that's why possibly individuals didn't talk about them. But as a state that lie by the side of both the Atlantic Ocean and the River Niger, every year we spend millions upon millions dealing with this issue of flood. The federal government must take steps, and I'm sure that a number of you who are my colleagues in the media have continued to advocate on the need for us to, one, take steps to dam the River Niger and the Benue. The advantage of that damming is not only to prevent flooding, but that we're also able to possibly generate electricity from that particular dam. But beyond the issue of damming, you now notice that a number of states find it very difficult to even carry out agricultural activities during the dry season. With a dam that would have ended up preventing the magnitude of flood that would not cause trouble to homes, would have also been able to generate power, would have also been able to irrigate a number of farms, in which case we also increase productivity in terms of agriculture. Beyond that, I have also said that for so many years, the River Niger and the River Benue have become heavily silted. And what that means is that you are not even able to have advantage of these waterways for the purpose of inland waterways transportation. Just imagine somebody who stays in Kogi. Ordinarily, there should be a link between Kogi and Onitsha in Anambra, but you cannot go there by boat. But when you travel outside this country, you see individuals shortening the distances that they travel because they are able to take advantage of waterways. God has given us these waterways, but what are we doing with it? The distance between even Delta and Lagos, if you have to go by boat, may not even be up to 1 hour, 30 minutes. But you know what? We have not been able to develop it in such a way that individuals can take proper advantage of that. And so if the Benue River is properly desilted, and then you clear the foliage that may have covered the top of the water, the possibility of flying boats being able to convey people from Makurdi to Lokoja is very, very clear. And then ability of individuals to even travel from Lokoja to Onitsha and possibly down to some other parts in the lower part of the River Niger is also a possibility. I do know it's going to take enormous amount of water, but they say little drops of water makes a mighty ocean. So by the time we begin to take a step, and then take another step, and then take another step, we'll be getting closer to our destination. So we're not asking the federal government to do it in 1 year. If we have a proper plan, even the international community will be very much willing to even assist. In addition to the fact that you could also raise some revenue in the course of time. But all that we are not doing. So if we begin to take advantage of these waterways that God has given to us, by doing these two things I said, which is to dam the both waterways, the River Niger and Benue, and at the same time to desilt them, would have been able to gain a whole lot of advantage beyond the issue of preventing flood. Imagine the kind of billions that we spend annually. What has happened to Delta, Bayelsa, and Rivers? Because these are the three states that more or less had a whole lot of impact. The amount of money spent, even by government, is enough to go a long way in preventing this annual effect of this flood. Not to talk of what individuals themselves lost. No matter what the government has spent in taking care of these individuals, the individuals themselves have lost much more than whatever government will give to them. Somebody who have maybe farmland now where you have grown a whole number of crops, and all of a sudden, like for instance, you have a cassava plantation. There are individuals in Delta that were forced to just have to harvest their crop because They couldn't wait for it to lose totally. But at the end of the day, when you are harvesting cassava that is not mature, you are not also going to get value for your money. And so imagine all those losses that if we prevent them, how many billions we will be saving annually. And the fact that individuals who have been sacked ordinarily should have been contributing.
I can imagine. Real quickly, Commissioner, as we start to wrap up, also in this conversation, I want you to also add the perennial problem of water hyacinths across these waterways. You know, out of that, you want to speak to that because it's a big problem. We have no idea the immense impact water hyacinth is doing to our national economy, our maritime economy.
Yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that because, you know, water hyacinth is like pothole in a road that is tarred. It makes it difficult for you to move with the kind of speed that you would have loved to. So when you have water hyacinth, it prevents even easy movement of even ordinary canoe, the one that you paddle with your hands. Not to talk of its effect on other fast-moving speedboats or even a heavier ships. The moment you have all that, you are going to have challenge. Now, beyond the issue of desiltation, which will even increase the speed and the volume of water in these water bodies, and I speak specifically of the River Benue and the River Niger, and as the two major waterways. Of course, we do have other inland waterways that empties into either any of these two or possibly flow straight to the River Niger. So, if we are able in the course of time, desilt, one, it will increase the volume and the speed. And once you have speed, the water hyacinths may not even have that kind of ease with which they settle on top of the water, because water have got enough force to be able to push them out. But beyond that, the government must also take concrete steps to address the issue of water hyacinth, even as they address the issue of siltation. Because once that is done, the advantage that we get from waterways is enormous. We are not, apart from fishing, the issue of proper movement of people, the issue of water also available for agriculture, the issue of water now being able to make it possible for people to move. Imagine when people import their products. Who says that somebody should not have been able to take their product all the way to either Warri in Delta or One in rivers, and then you, through these waterways, you are able to bring it in even up to Lokoja. Today, the amount of money we spend having to haul our goods from Apapa in Lagos to wherever it's going to, number one, adds to the value and add to the price of those goods. Number two, and most importantly, causes a whole lot of damage to our roads. Look at, for instance, Dangote trucks. It takes as much as 45 tons, which is 900 bags of cement. Imagine if they are able to use the waterways to convey some of this cement using barges and then take it closer to where individuals or the distributors can take them off. Our roads would have been safer now that we do not even have a very functional rail system. But we are losing so much by not taking advantage of these waterways. So I agree with you that we need to take steps to both desilt and address the issue of water hyacinth so that we take advantage of what God has given to us. There are countries that are looking for this, but they don't have it.
Yes, you're correct. Thank you so much for that. And that also segues into the conversation on the environment and COP and all of that.